Key point 1. Don't play with your food. Technological advancement has accelerated all the processes around us, including our eating. Not only that, but human curiosity has led the most brilliant minds into the trap of knowing it all. At least this is what decades of failed innovations exhibit. Our parents' generation may be the last to remember fresh market produce, not shelves filled with tongue-twisting ingredients we're not sure should be in a loaf of bread. Today, most of the products we see on the store shelves are dubious iterations of the original food. Unfortunately, we've grown comfortable buying what sits the closest and looks the most edible because time is money. We trust the health claims on the packages, yet our hospital and pharmacy bills tell us another story. So the question is, how did we end up in this vicious cycle? Like children playing with a toy kitchen, we shop, pretending the food on the shelves is real. At some point, Michael Pollan asked himself the same thing. A witness to gastronomic changes through decades, he wondered why people kept getting sick and obese despite all the fuss about scientifically improved foods, and his journey led him to unexpected discoveries. Perhaps the most surprising was to find out the noble goal turned against itself, dragging consumers along with it. You're probably confused right now. What does this mean? Well, if you find yourself intrigued, it means you either care about your health, have the curiosity of a child, or both. Whatever your reasons, why not grab an apple and spend a few minutes feeding your stomach and mind? Now, give in to the temptation of discovery with us. Key point 2. Over-marketed foods digest worse. The Western food industry is undergoing an identity crisis it's cast upon itself. The nutritionist community is exhausted and worn out by food companies' marketing that disguises its financial interests as health benefits for its clients. In fact, food businesses and scientists hit the wall when the innovative, low-fat, and nutrient-packed diets turned out to be edible Frankenstein monsters with little to do with sustainable and healthy eating. Journalists have also grabbed a piece of the cake, writing about modern diets and nutrient needs they have no expertise in, except for regurgitating the results of contradictory scientific papers. Speaking of studies, extended research on links between the Western diet and health benefits exposes hints of it not being as healthy as its marketing suggests. As Pollan points out, nutrition science is flawed and knows embarrassingly less than it can admit at the expense of consumers' well-being. Just relatively recently, in the 1950s, families led a more natural diet than modern nutritionists now dub high-fat or even cancerogenic. Pollan recalls his grandmother's home-cooked food, like stuffed cabbage, meats, and vegetables cooked in duck fat. However, Pollan's mother, a woman of the progressive generation, cooked completely differently. Having embraced the latest scientific knowledge, she believed animal fats were dangerous, unlike distilled vegetable oil. Of course, they were more expensive and the companies needed a persuasive endorsement to sell them. As time passed and more studies found another health risk in eating a la our grandparents, people grew more suspicious and even paranoid about buying foods that don't have an extra reassurance of their natural origin somewhere on the package. Commerce on your plate today is a drug prescription tomorrow. At this point, a regular unwashed carrot or potato would send shivers down an average city person's spine. Supermarkets have become the #1 site to obtain food, and they're full of processed meals and chemically manipulated fruits or vegetables. This way, consumers lose touch with old ways to grow their produce and witness the organic ripening. Instead, they confine themselves to the nutrient aspect of eating, becoming unhealthily addicted to healthy eating, also known as orthorexia. Did you know? Separately, nutrients can be dangerous to humans. For example, despite the popular misconception, raw beta-carotene can increase cancer risk. Key point 3. Never try to fool nature. The idea of nutritionism has its roots in early 19th century science. Names like William Prout and Justus von Liebig made a dubious revolution in nutrition by proclaiming protein, carbohydrates, and fat as the only necessary fuel for a human body. Liebig simplified human metabolism to a short list of chemical nutrients, ignoring the essential vitamins and amino acids. Such a plain and straight classification served marketing well. Food companies started promoting artificially combined nutrients instead of naturally balanced vitamins, fibers, and minerals in traditional produce. Put differently, the lab experiments enabled them to sell any selected elements they proclaimed healthy. Along with so-called good nutrients, the food industry presented bad ones to encourage sales. As you might expect, traditional foods like butter, eggs, or sugar were proclaimed non grata, disrupting the long-established dinner table. By attributing cancerogenic and obesity risks to these products, scientists and later the government promoted the growing impact of food companies that started selling nutrients-packed in products. To ponder further, switching focus to elements instead of whole foods enabled the producers to modify allegedly dangerous products with healthy nutrients. As a result, we now have margarine, butter without cholesterol, and saturated fats, and milk with vitamin D. You're right, there's no vitamin D in milk, but why not add it in a lab? As far as the 1930s, processed foods got a shelf of their own in supermarkets, practically the only place to buy food in urban spaces. At first, the government was reluctant to substitute some products. For example, many consumers refused to accept margarine at first. Then, in 1938, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act presented the standards for food produced and distributed in the U.S. The same act required labeling synthetic imitations of natural foods. However, the more processing technologies advanced, the fewer imitations looked as such. Furthermore, animal scientists learned to raise safer and more nutrient-rich cattle, like feeding flaxseed to hens for more omega-3 infused eggs. Ironically, despite persuading customers to buy modern food, most studies failed to find the link between natural foods and notorious diseases like coronary heart disease or cancer. On the other hand, the trans fats found in many synthetic products increase the risk of these illnesses. Eventually, craving the cash rein backfired on the original goal. Playing Frankenstein with nature is a tough pill of responsibility. Key point 4. Too much of a good thing. As the nutritionism ideology spread over the U.S., more and more people stopped receiving pleasure from eating and recognized only the nutritional value. Such a shift in mindset goes hand in hand with turning products into proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and some vitamins and minerals that we can't see but believe are there. Nutrition scientists and food manufacturers programmed consumers to pluck out good nutrients and avoid bad ones, disregarding social and cultural contexts. Americans are one of the most abundant nations in the world, which manifests in the food they consume. The colorful variety of comestibles on the supermarket shelves tempts people to sample, get addicted, and buy more. Among them, so many products are low in nutritional value but joyful and delicious that it is impossible not to participate in superficial and mindless eating. In the beginning, we said Americans don't enjoy food anymore. Sounds counterintuitive, right? Well, this is where guilt comes into the picture. In one of his studies, psychologist Paul Rosen showed the words chocolate cake to several Americans, who immediately associated it with guilt, unlike the French, who responded with the word celebration. Rosen underlines the increasing cases of orthorexia nervosa, or obsession with healthy eating among American respondents. Speaking of the studies, nutritionists have much difficulty conducting adequate research, which misleads consumers, potentially aggravating disordered eating and obesity allegations nationwide. The main reason food studies fail to provide plausible results are 1. Observing the nutrients in diets outside of context, and 2. Participants' unreliable diet logs. Nutrients don't function alone. They only work with other nutrients, so chasing good ones makes little sense. But these invisible building blocks are so complex that scientists can't examine them together. Unfortunately, separating them strips elements of their nutritious context and compromises the product's health benefit. Cultural context is also important. Americanization of ethnic cuisines and adopting diets without adjacent lifestyles does little to improve the national fat panic. To make food choices more scientific is to empty them of their ethnic content and history. Michael Pollan. The Mediterranean diet is a good example. Adopted outside regular physical labor and fasting, typical for people of that region, Americans don't understand how consuming fatty meat, fish, and lots of olive oil doesn't make Mediterraneans obese. Truth hides in the balance. Sometimes scientists dissect vigorously. Excess is always harmful, whether it's healthy or junk food. Key point 5. Better not rush perfection. The Western diet has concluded decades-long industrialization and urbanization. Of course, none of these two processes are innately negative, but their scale harms our eating habits and thus our health. This idea has been brought to the attention of scientific society by Karen O'Day, a professor of nutrition from Australia, who recreated the indigenous lifestyle for a group of 10 Aboriginal people. For 7 weeks, they returned to their origins to live and find their own food. The results were unprecedented. All participants lost excess weight, their blood pressure dropped, and the level of omega-3 fatty acids lacking in the Western diet increased. Another researcher, Weston A. Price, who studied several Aboriginal diets in the pre-World War II period, found no ideal set of meals for maximum well-being. His discovery showed many ethnic groups relied on local sources of food. Such diets were heavily inclined toward mainly meat, fish, or green consumption. However, this factor didn't compromise the group's overall health indicators. Despite his controversial ideas, Price argued that unprocessed foods were generally healthier, regardless of prevailing nutrients. The latest studies also show no signs of so-called Western diseases like diabetes, obesity, hypertension, or cancer among indigenous people in their natural environment. However, their health significantly worsened when they moved to cities. Cut from natural sources of nourishment, they consumed more processed food manipulated at the labs, eventually catching the aforementioned diseases. Gradual adaptation is the staple of successful evolution. No hurry was ever justified. Nonetheless, blaming a disrupted diet for all health issues would oversimplify the problem. Healthcare plays a critical role in people's well-being. On the one hand, the advocates of lab-destructed food point to studies that proved the decrease in chronic diseases nationwide. However, they disregard healthcare advancement over the last couple of decades, which contributed most to the statistics. On the other hand, as life expectancy increases, more people experience age-related illnesses, which creates an illusion of an aggravated health situation. Last but not least, modern agriculture has played a conclusive role in deteriorating soil and vegetation quality. Fertilizers feed the soil disproportionately, depleting future produce of sufficient nutrients due to faster growth to satisfy market demands. As a result, the fruits and vegetables we consume are less nutritious, contributing to vitamin and mineral deficiency in our bodies. Key point 6. Get close to your dinner. So, is there a way to dodge the bullet and eat healthier? Yes, but we must remember that this change takes time and effort. The good news is that we don't have to adhere to any counter-Western diet philosophy. The simpler and more natural our shift is, the better. We must accept that the food industry will continue presenting more processed products, and the medical community will continue turning health issues into an opportunity to offer new medication. Pollan makes it clear that our health is heavily tied to environmental balance as part of the food chain. One small problem reveals a serious imbalance in the entire system. The only way we're going to reduce disease is to go backwards to the diet and lifestyle of our ancestors. Dennis Burkitt. Today, the structure of our cities and lifestyles seem to debilitate our efforts to eat clean. Hurrying between work hours or exhausted after, we're unlikely to spend more than 15 minutes at the grocery store comparing the ingredients and reading long names of additives. Ironically, that's exactly what you don't have to do. Whenever you see unpronounceable components, leave that loaf of bread be. Here are some other tips. Avoid health claims on the package. Check out the store's edges for healthier foods because processed foods are always in the center. Shop at local farmers markets whenever possible. Being conscious of your food choices is one of the most mature acts of self-care. However, what and how should we eat? We're so used to convenience food that we forget it's unnatural. Well, there are some rules to remember too. Inquire about the quality of the cattle's lives if you're not a vegetarian. Meat isn't essential in our diets, so you can skip it if you're unsure of its origins. Add more plants and various greenery to your menu. Try wild but not endangered foods like berries or mushrooms. They have no pesticides. Try Greek, Japanese, or Indian diets. They're natural and nutritious. Don't eat alone. Mealtime is for communion, so make it meaningful. Listen to your gut. Don't eat more than you feel is enough. Cook at least a couple of times a week. It's a great way to appreciate your food and cherish your body. Conclusion. Whenever civilization takes a new historical turn, it reflects on every sphere of life. Nutrition is an unforeseen variable in this situation because its change is largely unnoticeable due to its gradual transformation. This problem is why consumers today find themselves at the crossroads of supermarket aisles. Since science entered the sphere of food, the latter has changed for the worse, challenging our digestive systems. Unfortunately, the lack of consumers' knowledge about nutrition science allows food and pharmaceutical companies to impose more chemically complex, but unsafe products and treatments that target chronic diseases resulting from new unhealthy eating. The low-fat and low-carbohydrate diets were supposed to become an answer to obesity smothering the nation, but we didn't realize it was its cause all along. As it turns out, science was as clueless about the magic foods as we were. Nutrients are like people. They can't function properly alone. Nutrients must work in tandem to release their full potential, so shopping for individual vitamins is useless. Programmed to avoid bad nutrients, we forget that balance is more important than chomping on good nutrients. In other words, nothing's good in excess, which is the simplest yet fundamental rule of healthy eating. Perhaps Americans are perplexed by Greeks, Italians, or French, who seem to never gain weight despite not dieting. It's part of the culture we must relearn for our physical and mental well-being. After all, food is to be enjoyed, not counted. Try this. Never skip meals. Instead, make them a ritual. Doing so will improve your attitude to food and help you avoid cravings. You can manage stressful eating by developing coping mechanisms like exercise, walks, meditation, or even calling a friend. Don't ban bad products. Listen to your body and decide whether it needs them.